Before we get started, a programming note. There will be no weekly news wrap-up this week. The reason why there isn't going to be is because every once in a while I get one of these interviews that is just unbelievable, and I want you to see it. It's timely. I want people to hear it. It's going to be an in-depth interview. Some of the things I would have talked about in the weekly news wrap-up, I'm going to bounce them off my upcoming guests. So no weekly news wrap-up, but just this week, okay? I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. With us, a phenomenal talent. He says he's self-taught. And he must have taught himself really well because he was a consultant for big companies like Microsoft, the U.S. government, big car companies like Chrysler, aircraft companies like Boeing, airlines like British Airways. What a talent. A brilliant guy. Of course, a lot of people in the internet world were self-taught. I'm talking about Clif High. Clif High from Half Past Human. Clif High, thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Thank you very much for having me. It's going to be good.
I know you got brand new information out, and you have a website called Half Past Human. And what you have come up with is a way to send bots and collect millions and millions and millions of pieces of information, so you can figure out what people are thinking and be predictive. Hopefully, I'm getting this right. And you are out with a new set of pieces of information. Is that about what you do? Is that right? You want to explain that a little more?
Sure. Basically, I do deep data mining the same way that many parts of the federal government and the intelligence agencies do. But in my case, I don't care about the individual data about an individual person. I aggregate it and sort of like skim the cream off the top for my predictive linguistics. And it's been ongoing since 1993 in terms of when I first started doing the software and writing the code for it. I had the first what I call a data run, where I went out and swept in 50 or 60 million data points, and I did that in 1997 and had the very first set of data that led me to a particular kind of a conclusion. Now, bear in mind, when I started this off in the 90s, the economic period and so on, I was attempting to basically gain an edge, if you will, write an algo that would be personal so that I could get an edge over the stock market and make money that way. And then I got sort of derailed when I actually saw the data that came back.
Okay, and then you can buy these reports, which we'll talk about that at the end of this. You only sell them individually. You don't have a year subscription, so you just, here's my report, you can buy it or you cannot. So we'll talk about this, but one of the things I wanted to bring up, this is one of the things I would have brought up in my weekly news wrap-up. I mean, the dreadful things we're finding out about the hitman, Bob Creamer, about sending people dressed in Donald Duck suits at what he says at the behest of Hillary Clinton, and also John Podesta, the top guy in her campaign, writing a huge memo, dozens of pages, about how to take the polls and alter them to make them look false, and how to make Hillary Clinton look good. I mean, it's unbelievable. Evidently, he'd send this out to ABC, NBC, CBS, all the propaganda media. I'm just going to call them that. They're really not the news media any longer. And in the pre-interview, and this is where I want to start, you said to me, what I keep getting is Trump wins by a landslide, Hillary disappears. Trump wins by a landslide, Hillary disappears. Let's start there.
Wait. Okay, well, let's correct that, because in my work here now, I'm a linguist, and the word was not disappeared, is missing.
Missing. Okay.
Missing. And there's a whole context around that is different. So.
Okay, well, let's go ahead. Okay, so yeah. Trump wins by a landslide, Hillary disappears. What does that mean? What do you think it means?
Well, I think that it means exactly that we don't ever get to see Hillary as a candidate. However, there's another alternate interpretation of that. And that is that the data could be saying that she will be 100% unavailable through the rest of the election, which we kind of know is the situation anyway. But that this is all tied up with one other phrase in there, which was, it doesn't matter. Now, that's a very interesting phrase to come up in our data set, because usually there are not descriptors that are at a hard level making a conclusion. And that's what it does not matter is a conclusion about a set of circumstances, of facts, or scenario. And we rarely get straight out conclusions in the data. More often we get the descriptors of the situation. So it is my interpretation at this point that the deep state may be so fixated on their candidate winning that it won't matter that or how the election actually comes out. Now, there's another layer on top of that that's been seen in our recent data. And again, that's the phrase, it doesn't matter. And so from the focus that I originally engineered in 1990s into the data and its economic or fiscal or financial pointedness has still influenced it. So there may be able to say again that the election part does not matter, and in which case, if we take that interpretation, it's talking about the dollar and everything else in the economic system. So the election doesn't save anything, solve anything, or cure anything. And in fact, from our data sets, it would look like perhaps it may be an initiator of things.
So you think that what you're saying, despite all these polls, which now have been laid bare, I mean, John Podesta laying out a how-to juke the polls to make Hillary Clinton look good. If you look at the anecdotal evidence, nobody's showing up at her rallies, nobody's showing up with Tim Kaine, less people are showing up for Donald Trump than less people are showing up for Barack Obama, the current president, than Donald Trump, and he's saying the whole polls are rigged. So you're saying that this cuts through all the rigging, and it says, woo, Donald Trump wins by a landslide.
A little bit more than that, because when I first started getting that level of data, bear in mind that these data sets grow over time. We do processing for about 18 or 20 days at the first part of the month, and it's sort of piggybacked on the data from the previous month, at least insofar as the linguistic structures. But when this first started coming up, I figured, well, obviously the structured polls by Reuters et al. Aren't to be believed under any circumstances. So I sort of did my own quick and dirty, and you can do this yourself if you want, and that would be to pop up a window in a browser and go to YouTube and do a search on YouTube that brings back a list of primary speeches by both candidates. And by primary, I mean ones that not Fred Smith's copy of a video he made of Trump, but rather a copy that they took officially of Trump making the speech and released it officially. If you'll take those and just look, you can see that you've got Hillary Clinton on one side with 2,165 views and Trump on the other side with 775,653 views. So that's not anecdotally. This is a very crude level of statistical analysis, but it is nonetheless statistical analysis, and it's very pointed because it is extremely self-selecting. There's not necessarily anyone watching you when you choose to watch something on YouTube. So there's no peer pressure. There's no external person there polling you who you have to interact with in order to get your information across. It's what I call a very naked data set because there's no pressure at an emotional level on people. And you have to understand, too, that when you're in a polling situation, the individual that is actually taking the poll, taking the questions, by the way they ask the questions, can slant things any number of ways. And there's also levels of obligatory acquiescence that people do when they're in the presence of a pollster. In other words, you don't want to, there's this inbuilt, I want to do good kind of a thing, right? You don't want to irritate them. And so you have a tendency to try and meet their expectations. And
so what does the naked data set tell you about Donald Trump then? What does the naked data set say?
It says basically when you go through and do all that analysis there and in the other video archives, you come up with about a 25-to-1 ratio.
25? You're telling me that so when you say landslide, we're not talking about beaten by 10 or 15 or 20 points.
Correct.
You're saying that the landslide's going to be 25-to-1 or 20-to-1 or huge, or levels, orders of magnitude big.
Correct. But there's always the issue. Remember, it doesn't matter who or how you vote. It's who counts the votes and then who releases the information about it. So I could be 100% accurate, and we may never, ever see it because the structure, the deep state structure, brings it back so that it's neck and neck. That's their goal, actually, on all of these areas where they face a vulnerability from, you've seen it recently in Brexit, where they shift the polls and engineer it to try and get it to be a feather's distance apart. That way, the people that they're intending to cheat are not provoked into any kind of acting out a behavior on that. So you think, oh, well, it's so close. I know I was real for it, and everybody I know was for it, but it's always been so close, neck and neck. Obviously, this is the way it was supposed to go. Well, they can't do that sort of thing when you've got huge spreads between their expected ending and what the people actually are thinking.
That's what Catherine Austin Fitz, who I had on recently, said. If she gets less than 10% of the vote, and I thought, wow, 10%. You're telling 25-1. She got Jill Stein. Here's the other thing I can't, and maybe you can shed some light on this. And this is just me as just a normal guy going, wow, you had over half the electorate, the Democrats, cheated. It's been laid bare by the WikiLeaks, the collusion between the DNC and the Clinton campaign. The Debbie Wasserman Schultz stepped down. Done. Right. They didn't deny it. And so you have over half. Bernie Sanders probably won California and many other states, which they say he didn't. How do you get, and I'm thinking to myself, how do you get those voters to vote for somebody that cheated your candidate? And these are millennials that will go online and will read WikiLeaks and will do online searches. These are precisely the people that Hillary Clinton doesn't even get. So is that play a part of this landslide that these people were cheated online? Does your data say anything about the Bernie Sanders voters? That I haven't talked to a single one that said, oh yeah, my candidate was cheated, but I'll still vote for Hillary Clinton. I haven't talked to a single one that said they'd vote for her.
The data set doesn't quite deliver that sort of information. Okay, it's the data that I get is an aggregate at a tens of millions of rows level. And so the kind of information I get skirts around personalities such as that. I get information that it won't matter. The 25-1 spread was, I then go out and calculate. I go and look at the data sets, and we get a picture of basically confusion. So here's the thing. Whatever the vote level, if the deep state decides to report it as a Hillary Clinton victory of some number of points, you'll never know. However, the emotional reaction that is forecast by the data sets has a tendency to say that it's going to be very, very, very confusing. This is not going to be a contested kind of a situation like we had with Bush and Gore, where basically two parts of the crime family were sort of fishing around for some extra votes to see if they could pull it across, right? Rather, what the data sets are describing here is a pivotal point, a significant change in the social contract, a ripple-on effect into the financial and economic world, and a continuing source of irritation and questioning that goes on as far as the end of our short-term data. So let me stop and say that in my system there's three types of data. There's immediacy data, which is effective from 3 days out at the time that I get hold of it to the end of the third week. There's short-term data, which is effective from the end of the third week to the end of the third month. And then there's long-term data, which goes from the end of the third month onward. So the most details come in the immediacy data. The closer we get to events, we get more details. This has actually now been confirmed by IARPA. DARPA, the people that invented the internet for the military. And they have an analog now called IARPA. DARPA is Defense Agency's Advanced Projects Research Agency. And IARPA is Intelligence Agency's Advanced Research Project Agency. And those guys have just come out recently and announced that they can read immediacy data. Now, I've been doing that since 1997, so I wasn't impressed. But nonetheless, the fact that they're actually going ahead and announcing we can look 7 days into the future on some things tells me, boy, they've struck the immediacy data. They finally have cracked that. And so I know where they're at in their progress towards being very, to sort of mimic our work. But the data sets that we've got here are talking about a level of confusion that is very much Banana Republic style, or something you might find in Mexico. Just in terms of their local politics are very much Banana Republic in the various provinces. And you see this where in Mexico, the woman who was a candidate had 45 students killed, and that crept into a huge, giant scandal over time, affecting many of the Mexican states. But she was the deep state candidate, and so she was slotted in. We've got that kind of a situation showing up in the data now. So it doesn't address the Bernie Sanders people being distressed and voting or not voting. What we get is a linguistic representation of the headlines that will be appearing after a certain set of events or a period of time. So it's kind of like I'm getting a headline of what's going to be happening in the week following the election. And the top dog word is confusion, at least insofar as the people that were voting. I don't think the deep state's going to be confused.
And the polls are phony. I mean, I've been saying that I don't believe anything the polls say. Does your research back that up? The polls where she's up 8 points or 10 points or 6 points, or
No,
whatever, those are phony, correct? Those are false.
Those are 100% manufactured at our level of data. Basically, what I do is I send out these bots. They bring back web pages. I don't care so much about email. I get the comments on websites, Facebook, all of this kind of stuff. I never care anything about the individual persons that are posting any of this. We're after specific sets of language in the form of primarily verbs, but and these are plotted in a very aggregated fashion. But because of that, I have aggregated clumps that tell me, oh, okay, in this particular bin in my database, there's 55 million reads that relate to Trump. And in this other one, there's maybe 75 million that relate to Clinton. But the emotional sum for Trump is is this value here, and the emotional sum on that data for Hillary Clinton is this value way down here. And these emotional sums are misleading. All the emotional sum is literally the sum of all the emotional values that are isolated from the various words. I need to stop and say back in 1993 or so, I was given a particular challenge by Microsoft. It led me to do some thinking over the course of 94 and onward that allowed me to invent this thing I called the emotional reduction engine. And what it does is it takes text that you type and it has a numeric quantifier and a qualifier assigned to that word that provides me with a view of that word in its context and how it's being used emotionally. So returning to the subject here, in the bin for Trump, we might get up into 7.2 or so out of a scale of 10, and 10 being positive and minus 10 being negative. And over on Clinton, what we have is maybe it's a 1 or maybe it's a 2, so hovering very close to the neutral or even negative. So I can tell that the entire amount of mass of linguistics about Clinton are not all positive. In fact, they're probably more negative than positive. And then if I go in into further look at it, then I can eliminate, and that's what much of my processing is to eliminate stuff that's getting in the way of prescient information. But I'll eliminate all of those officialdom produced words. And then I'm left with just the general internet chatter, social media, etc. And on those, I can see, it went from maybe a 1 or even a -1, and now it's down into -6. So
for Hillary Clinton.
Talking about Hillary Clinton.
Yeah. And when you see these polls out, where you see 12, ABC poll out 12 points, even George Stephanopoulos on the air not believing his own dang poll. And for good reason. And then you have this Podesta thing. Here's how you oversample Democrats, and here's how you oversample independents that lead Democrat. And it's unbelievable. When you see these polls, you just totally 100% manufactured. You just don't.
Correct.
Nobody should believe these polls, is what you're saying.
Well, always look at the source, too. I mean, all of these individuals are part of the 6 propaganda outlets that the government uses. So obviously it's propaganda. And they're manufacturing it. So it's, made for a specific agenda propaganda. And as I point out, they need to have it be in everybody's mind conceptually. They're doing mind framing or collective brainwashing, however you want to think about it that way. And what they want everybody to understand that there's very little difference between the candidates, that it's a neck and neck race, and they'll do anything. And as you demonstrate, they're doing everything they can to engineer that perception, just as they had with the Brexit.
And in reality, you said, I'm sorry, I want to stop you here because I just got a question I want to get. In reality, with the Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump race, you're saying it's a blowout. It's a mismatch.
Correct.
The real data, and they know. Do you think they know this? They know it's a mismatch.
I would presume that they are very much more connected than I am and should have. In fact, I assume that they know much more than I do about this, so they should be aware of this. And in fact, I think we have some evidence of that, and that is in a circuitous way. There's so much fear language and so much desperation language that's in our data set that is associated with outfits like the Council on Foreign Relations. Any kind of a quasi-officialdom organization and that we can sample. And in our samples, we've been finding over the past probably 2 years this very much rising trend line for fear-associated words, anxiety-associated words. And so it strikes me that they are very desperate to do this kind of engineering, and we're seeing it in their own language as they inadvertently express it when they're not aware that they are.
Let's move on to the economy, and that's one of the things that you originally tried to do this for in your
Right.
programs. And you're saying the computer program, one of the things that you were opining about on a recent video, and I got to tell you, a lot of people say the same things you're doing that I've had on this, just so you know this, and I told you I was going to bring this up, so
Yeah.
people know this isn't just Clif High. This is John Williams, who says, at least 16 trillion liquid dollar assets reside outside the country. And other big name people are talking about a bond supernova. Hugo Salinas Price, who basically started Electra, the Walmart, I guess you could say, of Mexico, says, we didn't print dollars, we printed bonds, and when these bonds liquidate, there'll be dollars raining down. It'll be hyperinflationary. What say you about the idea that Trump does win, but it doesn't matter because the whole thing melts down on the 9th of November, just like that?
I don't know that just like that part, because you're talking about a giant mass. So we're not going to melt this anytime soon. The flames may start on the 9th in a very visible way for everyone. They're going to be dominated that week by our data sets anyway. The forecast is confusion. And the confusion is going to reach into the markets because, well, you can imagine if there is confusion about who is the victor, and even if there is not, the massive confusion affecting the 25-to-1 ratio is going to be manifested. Unlike the confusion that might be manifested if it was a 51-to-49 kind of a victory, right? And so all of that's going to start going on, and the economy, the financial structure under which we live in our data sets takes a terrible hit on the 9th. That part of it is being forecast straight out. And the kind of hit it's going to take is going to affect Forex all the way over through to retail sales. And we've got just a huge spread of things that are occurring from the 9th onward that basically are leading up to the larger mass of problems we face next March in the economic system.
So the ball, just to get this going, so the ball gets rolling. We're going to know that we got, Houston, we have a problem on the 9th of November. Now, the space capsule isn't going to blow up then, but we're going to know we have a problem. Just so you know, Walmart, which I thought, not Walmart, I'm sorry, excuse me, Kmart, which I thought was a few months ago, a month ago, 6 weeks ago, came out and said, we're closing, several dozen stores. They couldn't wait till the fourth quarter, the most profitable quarter in retail, to close these stores. And I'm thinking, how bad does it have to be? And are you seeing that this has been a deteriorating economy all the way, and then on the 9th we take that cliff dive? Is that what you're seeing?
It's more like we're in a depression now, and the illusion that everybody's been manufacturing, they just give up the Potemkin village face of it all on the 9th. And I think it's a real energy issue. If the deep state is confused about how things are going to occur going forward, in other words, they know their candidate lost, but they're still potentially going to try and engineer things, that level of confusion on the deep state part is what's going to draw in the collapse component on the other. And that'll start happening instantly on the 9th, because the deep state is so intimately involved in our predatory cronyism financial structure. And think of the situation just from a regular guy's perspective in London, right? Maybe somebody who owns an apartment and has some money invested. When it looks like the United States is going to go a little bit dingy and be crazy, and you've already been prepped by the official propaganda media to presuppose we will be crazy if Trump wins, because we will be led by a crazy person, well, then your response is going to be to withdraw any potential economic influence, right? You're going to take away your stocks and sell your stocks, this kind of thing. Plus, the bonds are in a very weird situation where we have a two kinds of bonds going at the moment: those that are in a positive state of interest, however minimal, and those that are in a negative state of interest. And theoretically, negative interest is like, cold fire. It should not exist.
Yeah. Here's another one. Another just idea. I thought about this. Tell me if I'm all wet or not. I don't know. I'm going to ask you because you're the guy that does all the data. I'm really into this. I hope other people are into this too. People have been told Clinton's going to win. All the mainstream media has come out. I mean, Washington Post, New York Times, some type of title. It's over. Some type of idea. Clinton's already got it in the bag. She's won. I heard one of her campaign top people saying, well, she runs the risk of being overconfident. She's not going to be available, to your point. But what happens if we've been told she's going to win? She's up by 10, 12, that she's way ahead. Oh, she's killing it. And then we find out she gets, Jill Stein gets more votes than Hillary Clinton. What happens if on November 9th, in certain states, Gary Johnson gets more votes than Hillary Clinton? What happens then that they're almost setting people up for a crazy time that just like, what? It's so far off. And you're telling me that orders of magnitude, 25-1, Trump's got her beat 25-1 with your data sets. Oh my, let's say you're off by 50%. He's got her by 12-1, 12.5-1. Holy smokes.
You can prove it. You can prove it yourself.
I know, but so what happens if we get to this thing where everybody thinks, oh, she's got it in the bag, she's won it, but all of a sudden, boom, Trump, gets 300, in electoral college.
Well, no, he need not get any of the electoral college because all our data sets are referencing is like the popular public opinion sort of thing.
Oh, okay.
But you ask me what will happen, and I will put it right back to you because we've already seen what will happen in California. Bernie Sanders had everything going for him, and he lost. Well, he didn't lose. What happened was the propaganda media came out and said Hillary won, and they did it ahead of the game, so everybody sagged off, the emotional energy drained away, and then everybody made that assumption, and they made that assumption a reality. And so we've seen the tactic. They're attempting to engineer it now with the constant redo of the Reuters polls, the ABC polls, etc. And even CNN got caught out. They were after the last debate with their focus group, the 5 versus the 10.
Yeah. Yeah. Oops.
Oops. Oh no.
Oops,
just
truth.
like lawyers, never ask a question you don't know the answer to when you're propaganda.
And
so
that
they
plays
really
along
blew
with
it.
but that also plays into your data, which is it's lopsided. I mean, any way you want to cut it, 25-1, 10-1, 12-1, 8-1, 5-1, it's lopsided to Donald Trump.
But does it matter? Probably not. Not if the deep state comes on out, and they're the people that actually control the people that count the votes, and they deliver it'd be a fiat selection kind of a thing, saying, oh, Hillary Clinton has this many, Donald Trump has this many. And then what happens? That's the big question. Because we have so many of the contexts that are associated with Donald Trump also being associated with other larger social memes that I think that Trump would not be allowed to acquiesce to a Clinton victory under any circumstances, just because so many of his supporters know the deep state lies about everything, knows they lied about 9/11, knows they put in the Bushes, they put in the Clintons, they want these people. And the problem for the deep state is this is just like 1918. In 1918, at the end of the First World War, there was this big push for the League of Nations to go and basically go globalism. But people have had it. They just were totally done with that kind of thing, and globalism failed. They tried again after the end of World War II, but look how long it's taken them to engineer globalism again. But again, people have just had it. They want, actually, according to our data sets, people want to break up large countries into smaller, more friendly, more manageable, more tribal kind of communities. And the big giant national state is fighting a trend that is forecasting its own death. And so these people are going to fight to the end because they have no other alternative. There is no medium ground between the populace that is sick of being harvested, to use Catherine's words, by the deep state, and the deep state itself, which cannot exist without that harvest. And then you get into some of the stuff. Now, bear in mind, all your audience should be well aware that I deal in woo-woo. Now, woo-woo, by my definition, is everything that is officially denied and unknown and unexplainable. And so anything that's officially denied, like UFOs, that kind of stuff shows up in my data sets in a particular area, in what we call the space goat farts entity. And in there, the deep state is intimately co-joined with the secrecy around the UFOs and all of the stolen money out of the Pentagon and out of the rest of our society.
Trillions of dollars, just so people know. Trillions
right.
of dollars. The latest, Catherine Owens-Fitz said 9 trillion just this year, supposedly. Over 9 trillion. Go ahead.
Okay, but now imagine this effect on an entire generation and all the subsequent generations, because we were sort of born in the baby boom. We were in the 50s. You were born into this situation where there was a giant parasite on the country that's sucking money continuously. And this is the secrecy around the UFOs and all the stuff they're back engineering and all the weird stuff they're developing, and it leads to all of the rumors and the conspiracy theories about super trains under the continent and UFO bases in the middle of the ocean and all of this kind of stuff. Now, bear in mind, there only needs to be one UFO existent to have all of it be validated. If you have one of these little spaceships show up, then everything that could have existed around spaceships may have actually existed. So we're in a situation now where the populace has an emotional mindset that is at a diametric opposite end of the range from the deep state. And the deep state is just unwilling and unable to slack off at this particular point. And this has to do with the inflation of the money supply that has been going on as a result of the Federal Reserve from basically the 1930s onward, but it became most effective in the 1947 and onward. And what they actually did was, because they created so much debt, and they may have done it deliberately, and this is the woo-woo part, this is the conspiracy part of it, they created so much debt that they actually encouraged the population, to feel good about all the financial stuff going on, such that they bred more and brought more people forward. So we now have many more people on the planet than we had before, and it's almost as though they were deliberately engineering for a population boom, because they somehow knew they needed a certain level of population to achieve their broader goals.
Oh, and you know, Gregory Manarino, while you're drinking, says the same thing. He says this is going to be a resource issue. When it pops, he says people are going to die. I mean, that's the end result. There's going to be a lot of people that die. I want to get forward. You brought up the inflation card, and I want to sidetrack you a little bit, because you have talked about gold and silver and real assets. A lot of people have been on here saying paper assets are going to fry. They're going to burn. Brokerages are going to get into deep trouble. You could have a great stock portfolio. You're not going to be able to get to it. The brokerage is going to go under. The bonds are going to get creamed. Real estate's going to go down for a while. Gold and silver is one of the components in a car title, a house title, stuff you own. What's going to go on with gold and silver under the scenario that you've just talked about? What's happening with, let's start with gold.
Okay, gold and silver are going to rise relative to the falling currencies. And gold and silver in actual purchasing power will also rise. So it won't be the situation of where they say, well, gold bought a good suit back 100 years ago, and an ounce of gold will buy a good suit now. That's going to change. It's also going to change radically with silver. The ratio between the two are going to change, because silver is now that much more valuable. Also, we're going to discover, as a result of some of the forecasts that we've got in our data sets, that silver in 2019 through 2024 becomes the metal to have. To hell with gold. You need to have silver. The reason, because of this particular innovation wave that's going to be occurring over these next 5 years, or 6 years for us. Silver will become much more in demand than we can ever imagine now. And it actually may become too precious to use as a store of wealth, which is to say that the people that will invent some of the new electrics that need silver will basically be willing to pay whatever it takes to get the silver, simply because the output on the other side is so fantastic. So imagine if you had to pay $200 an ounce, or even $2,000 an ounce for silver, as a manufacturer of a device that basically, if it had that silver, it could operate and fundamentally never fail and never shut down, and it continually produces electricity just sitting there. So we're talking about sort of a new electrics, except that or sort of a free energy, except that there's a high capital outlay to create the devices. And so, but you wouldn't care if it was $2,000 an ounce, because those devices will be so much more valuable then, because of our deadly, and I'm using that word very advisedly, our deadly, our fatal future that's only in the 2020s awaiting for us if we don't solve the energy problem before we get there. So we're in a situation right now where the powers that be, officialdom as I describe it, caused debt to exist in the early all throughout the last century, such that we now have a population that cannot be sustained on our current energy diet. The oil is too expensive. We don't get enough BTUs for the BTUs put out for anybody to even be drilling oil now. It's a net energy loss. Unless we get over 15 barrels for every barrel we produce, our situation is very dire indeed. Fracking only gives you 1 for 5, and it's falling. So it's a net energy loss there. And we have this coming up. We have a huge population, and we have a huge population that's going to be demanding energy in a way that we had never anticipated, at the same time that all of our sources for energy are crashing. And the only thing I see in my data that's helpful is that we're also at the time that the demand for energy, the thing that causes that demand, is also the seed of its own solution for a problem, because that thing is 5 billion new people hitting the internet between now and 2021. And the level of innovation is just going to compound and skyrocket from there. And so it's forecasting real energy innovation for us in a distributed form that is unlike the battery walls and so on that Tesla cars guys are trying to put together, and is in fact much closer to 0 point, although it's not cost free.
Oh, and I want to come back. I just want to finish up on gold and silver, and that's a great discussion, and I don't want to minimize that at all. So we're going to have big inflation, huge inflation. What about gold? Does gold go to, I see you mentioned 25,000 an ounce. Jim Sinclair mentioned 50,000 an ounce, and that might seem cheap, according to his partner and buddy and a business partner, Bill Holter. He says, these are two smart guys. They know all about the markets, economy, gold, silver. He says $50,000, $60,000 an ounce may seem cheap for gold, and silver maybe $1,000 an ounce. Could you talk a little bit about gold, inflation, and silver?
Sure. The issue is that you have a lot of people running around saying that there's not enough gold. And in one way, that's true. If all of the gold that was mined was handed out, there would not be enough for 1 ounce per person on the planet. And so if we're going to use it as a medium of exchange, we've got to do something there. It's got to be split up into finer quantities and so on, which means it's more valuable. And we're at a situation where the inflation rate is totally unknown on the planet. We know it's in the mega quadrillions as they print digits all the time, but we have no real understanding because no one has actually been forthcoming with how much the central banks have polluted the money stream with in just the past couple of years. It is estimated, though, that you would need gold 125 an ounce if it were to back the SDRs. If that were the case, then
wait, 125. Let me get this straight. Gold at 125.
125,000.
Oh, 120. You said 125. I thought, whew.
Oh, sorry.
$125,000 an ounce. Stop. So to back all the SDRs, you need gold at $125,000 an ounce. Is that what I heard you say?
That's what I'm saying. The reason that that's the case is because in order to have the velocity of money required to have a growing civilization, you need that level of gold to support the SDRs that they're going to try and fob off on us as the impetus to go ahead and create new activity. From the viewpoint of the officialdom, they really don't care what they offer us. It's very much like the old Soviet Union, where the workers pretended to work and the bosses pretended to pay them. They gave you currency in the old Soviet Union, but you had nothing to buy. We've got sort of the reverse situation here, where they want us to continue to buy, and the powers that be know that gold and silver are very valuable, but if they can keep us all working at this frenetic and frantic pace, working for paper, so much the better, because they can produce as much of the paper as they want. So here's their situation. Our data sets talk about hyperinflation. It talks about hyperinflation as a result of a major deflationary bend in the financial infrastructure that occurs in late November and all through December and into January and February. And then we get an impact on the asset bubbles over February and March, such that by summer, the central banks are pulling each other's hair out in desperation as they're trying to churn up as much digital money as they can, such that we then have a forecast of a Dow indices at 125,000 value. That forecast originally showed up maybe 2 years ago.
So the Dow would be 100, not what 18,000, whatever it is now.
Correct.
The Dow would be 125,000. It would go up 5-6 fold. And then what would happen? And gold would be 125,000. Could be. That's what you're saying.
Correct.
What about silver? Silver could be 3,000 an ounce, 10,000 an ounce. I don't know.
Yeah, 10,000 is much more likely, but it's going to be a strategic metal. So I don't know that a lot of countries will even allow you to trade the stuff thereafter. We're going to get into a really strange time that will be quite odd, because places like there will be places with no national government that's effective, much as we have in Spain at the moment. In those places, you're going to get free markets opening up and real price discovery. And so, but these will be relatively isolated from the officialdom view of what price discovery is. Bear in mind, you right now think that gold has a particular value, not because that's what the price discovery has told you, but rather that's what the officialdom has told you. In this country, gold has that value because COMEX sets that price. And that's the price, but that's not the real cost. The real cost in this is rippling out and destroying the financial system, because we have no sound money backing anything. And basically, the officialdom, the powers that be, simply want us all to keep believing in the illusion that they've created, and all good things can keep going on and on and on.
Do we get to a point where it just crashes, the stock market crashes before we get that 125,000 Dow? Do we get a 5,000 Dow before it goes back up? I mean, does it crash and then they freak out and start printing money like crazy? Is it a V chart?
I don't get any kind of a chart stuff on our data set. So again, bear in mind, we do this linguistically. And so it's sort of like we get presented with headlines, and that's the best I can do. I can't really, open up an article and drill down in it.
Do you get a headline where it says it crashes, and then a headline where it says later on it skyrockets?
We get the headline that says it skyrockets. We don't have one that says it crashes, but we do have at that time headlines that say gold goes no offer, and silver is not to be found anywhere. At that same time, we have lots of little tiny headlines all around, which is like for most of 2017, 18, and 19. And these little tiny headlines all around would be discussing like regional situations where, oh, hey, it's just hit the news that this guy just bought a Bentley and he paid the fellow 2 ounces of gold and 10 ounces of silver and bought a brand new Bentley. Another guy, get a headline that, oh, well, here's a fellow that decided that, he wanted to trade some of his silver. And so he traded 9 or 10 ounces of silver and got himself a 75-foot motorboat on a lake in Tennessee. These kind of little tiny data sets form the immediacy and the short-term data. So we get a picture of price discovery breaking out against the wishes of a failing officialdom. And the failing part is quite clear at that stage. We've had this since 1999. All kinds of stuff about the dollar basically being totally rejected, and the political structure fracturing, and problems here. The issue that we have is very complicated, and that is, well, it's so complicated that many people are not even aware of who the players are in an economic collapse of the United States. We have the parasites we have to deal with. Bear in mind, those parasites, as you just said, sucked away $9 trillion here recently. They need that money for something.
That is according to the government too. That's not some fantasy number. That's according to the Inspector General or official number. So
right. And I think that money actually goes over to a room somewhere, and you open up a door and you set it on a table in there, and there's just only another door in that room, and you shut your door and the other door opens up, and then the what we call the breakaway civilization. Those individuals for the past 60, 70 years that have been part of the secrecy effort and reverse engineering UFOs and stuff, these are the people that need that money desperately, because all their stuff is very expensive because they're inventing it new. And so, everything is a prototype. Prototypes usually don't work. They've got a high run-through rate, a high burn rate that's not productive, and it isn't allowing them to make money, so to speak. And I bet you, I'm actually of the opinion now that they are in a race. The breakaway civilization is in a race to get enough money ahead before the crash happens that they won't suffer as a result of the dollar pollution, the Fed's interaction, and all of this kind of stuff. So our situation is so complicated that you've got the deep state, which is all the civil servants and everybody who's unelected but desperately or is continuously paid by the public purse. And then you've got the hidden part of the deep state, which is the shadow government. And these are the people that are never fired, and they're the ones that really run things. But then under that, you've got the black ops world that's been doing the reverse engineering, that's been sucking money like mad because they're desperate to do it for their yet next generation spaceship, this kind of thing. And so all of these hidden layers have an effect on my back because I'm a taxpayer. And so I've been a taxpayer long enough to have my back bent by trying to support all these parasites. I'm not alone. Our data sets are saying that the vast number of people that are in the Trump camp, whether or not they like him or even if they hate him, they're there because they know that things are unsustainable, unattainable anymore, and we're right at that precipice. We're actually at a situation, by the way, where it does not matter about taxes anymore. They don't have to collect a single piece of tax dollar from anybody in the United States because the United States Federal Reserve is going to print so much more money than they would ever get in taxes, and they're giving it right to the government anyway. Why bother to hassle?
And that's how we get the big inflation. They're going to print like crazy. Last question, and I don't want to end on a too dire note, but this is pretty dire. You must be getting some type of rumblings of war, carnage. I don't know, call it Armageddon, call it whatever you want. What's your data set saying about upcoming wars?
Let's put it as wars with little w, okay? Because there's no World War III stuff here. I don't.
Well, that's good. I mean, you don't see a nuclear exchange in your data sets.
No, we don't have. We don't have that. We don't have that showing up. We've got nuclear problems that I can detail that will occur August, September, or October of next year in the southeast as a result of what's going to occur to some rivers. So there's more radiation going to hit the northern hemisphere. There's more radiation to worry about, but it's not going to be nuclear weapons. Our stuff is always maintained. We've always had stuff in the data sets about nuclear war, and that's simply because the military-industrial complex and the propaganda media are continuously putting that out because they want everybody scared of it. If we eliminate the officialdom words from there, there's nothing in our prescient data sets that say that we're heading that way. I don't know for sure that we would get notice because we've just invented this system, and I mean, there's the government and intelligence agencies, predictive linguistics, Google, and a couple of the other people that are following behind on my work. But so I'm not in isolation here. But my data has been prescient insofar of stuff really totally unforeseen, meteors and that kind of thing, earthquakes and so on. So I suspect it would show a war if it were going to show up, and I don't have that in the data sets. What I do have, though, is not nuclear war with people dropping bombs and stuff on each other, but a general populace versus elite kind of a war globally, such that at some point in 2018, 2019, things become so dire here within North America that other countries like Russia and China have to send us aid. But we don't have it as a war. We have it as basically the same kind of language that they had in South Africa at the end of our apartheid. Okay, the same kind of reconciliation language, the same kind of chaos language, all kinds of confusion because there is no stable matrix anymore. The propaganda media die, and things just totally bust out.
You're telling me that the propaganda media dies, the MSM dies? Because I think they're never going to recover from what they're doing in this election. They are never, and all the stuff that's been laid bare with Project Veritas, he's a great guy, by sticking his neck out, and all the WikiLeaks and Julian Assange, they've been laid bare. They are propaganda. They're not the news media. They're committing fraud on shareholders and fraud on the public. You're saying that the mainstream media, the legacy media, will die.
Correct, and it's very easy to understand, especially within our data sets. If we get the major economic problem on the 9th, starting then, the media exists like all the other corrupt elements within our system because of the ability to float so much money that all these bribes and everything can be taken off without us totally dying. Well, we've been sucked dry by the parasites, so we're at that limit. We can't have that happen anymore. As the economic stuff goes down, there's a bunch of pile-on effects. So all the poor people that are going to pass early because they can't get their medicine and so forth, there you go, right? That group at that point is primarily the mainstream media audience now.
Okay, I see. You got
So
something going
so there's all these no, but it's going. But so there's all these other things that compound in there. Not only does the mainstream media, the propaganda media, get a big hit in the economics as the dollar starts plunging, and because they don't have gold, they're not like the CEO of Overstock.
on. Yeah, haha,
Yeah,
smart guy.
yeah, hey man, that
He
guy's
made out to be a kook. He'll be proven not to be such a kook.
You got it. And let me tell
Yeah.
you, the people that were involved with Bitcoin, they're going to turn out to be just giant geniuses because we must have a method for currency exchange. In the previous depression in the 30s, some counties in Missouri, Illinois, and Ohio did not have enough actual currency to change a $5 bill in the whole county. And so those counties, for a number of, in some cases, a decade, ran on script that was local script. Well, now we don't have to bother with that because we've got Bitcoin. And cryptocurrencies, but Bitcoin primarily. So there are vehicles for us to navigate through these rather treacherous waters ahead. A lot of this stuff is detailed in my reports, but no, I don't fear the Russians because of two things. I know a lot of Russian language, and so I can read their text, read what's going on in their media, but also because I'm a martial artist and I do grappling, and so is Putin. He's a judoka, and so a student of judo, not just somebody who messed around with it. And so that's going to frame and inform his mind in terms of how he deals with this. And it's just so silly. But I sit here and I watch the lawyers that are our quote leaders as they bumble and stumble right into yet another throw by Putin. And it's like they just don't grasp this. They are so stupid, I think, or so unaware, or so affected by the same things they've been putting out on all of us, the chemtrails, the bad food, the GMO, et cetera, that they are suffering a disease of their own making. And so we're very much terminal in that regard. We have to cleanse the body politic because we're not going to survive. You can't take a nation our size, pollute the food body so we can't get energy and we're not eating correctly, pollute the skies with the chemtrails so we're breathing all the heavy metals, pollute the money with all of the wastage that is the central banks and the Federal Reserve, and expect to get a quality country. If you're going to make America great again, you better make America sound again before you try that. And it all starts and ends with sound money.
Oh, people are going to love this interview, and they're going to say, I can see why you didn't have, your normal weekly news wrap up. Quickly, how do people buy your halfpasthuman.com? Is that correct?
Yep.
And then you have a report. You only sell individual reports, no yearly, no whatever. Here's
Correct.
a report.
Correct.
Here's this report. You can buy it in another month or two or whatever. You can buy another report. It's a one shot only. You can buy a la carte, buy reports, correct?
Correct. And that's because we know in our data that something's going to come along and interrupt us, and I don't want to owe people anything.
I got you. Okay. I mean, the internet will, just in closing, you think at some point between now and the end of the year or the end of 2017, you're saying we're going to have a big internet disruption like we just had in the Northeast and out West?
No, it won't be that so much. I don't think that'll be the problem for us. Because we recover fairly. I do everything in a batch process because I started so long ago. I was actually working on mainframes at the time, and so was thinking batch mode. Also didn't have the computing power to run continuous back with Windows 3.1, right? No, it won't be that kind of interruption. We're going to have big problems in the United States next year as a result of earthquakes and other natural problems, not disasters, that will affect the internet sporadically. And we'll also have energy problems that will affect the internet sporadically for a number of years as it floats through various areas. But no, there's not going to be a generalized internet crash that would cause us to have problems. But any number of things, including officialdom, may interrupt my ability to provide a service.
Clif High. Whoa, man! Thank you for taking us all to school. I hope you come back. It's half-past human.
Sorry to interrupt, but the very first thing you ever do, or the very first act that occurs to you when you experience any of the Enlightenment phenomena, is you start learning to say things by their correct name. And so, no, I would never ever take anybody to school because I'm self-educated, and there's a big difference between education and schooling.
Okay. Thank you for. How about enlightening us?
There we go.
How about thank you for enlightening us. The website, halfpasthuman.com. You can buy his reports. He has some free information on there as well, correct?
Correct.
And he's got his reports in there. How much are your reports for a report, just typically?
$15 for a month's report.
Wow. Clif High, thank you very much for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com. Hope you come back.
Oh, sure will. It's been fun.